Good morning. It is Thursday, September 10th, 2020. You can now relax and be informed. Here is your daily bite of news. Oregon state wildfires destroyed 5 towns, just as 3 fatalities are confirmed in one of California's fires. While more than 24 major blazes continue to wreak havoc across swaths of California, winds up to 50 miles per hour sent flames engulfing hundreds of homes. Firefighters were forced to retreat from uncontrollable blazes, while officials gave residents "go now" orders to evacuate in just minutes. This could be the greatest loss in human lives and property due to wildfire in our state's history, Governor Kate Brown said. Climate scientists say global warming has contributed to greater extremes in wet and dry seasons across the U.S. West, causing vegetation to flourish, then dry out, leaving more abundant, volatile fuel for fires. On Wednesday morning, the city of San Francisco and surrounding areas were blanketed in a thick coat of orange smoke. Images of amber skies filled social media feeds, becoming a visceral symbol of climate change. California has seen 2.5 million acres burn this year, almost 20 times more than at the same point last year. Under particular threat is California's backcountry, including the Sierra Nevada mountains and even the world-famous Yosemite National Park. There is a sense of exhaustion among Californians who have already dealt with weeks of toxic air and wildfire smoke, on top of one of the longest and harshest COVID-19 lockdowns. For many, the best solution is simply to leave. Even before this early start to the autumn fire, a mass exodus was underway. Rents in San Francisco had plummeted by 14 points since a year ago to their lowest point in 6 years. The United States has revoked visas of more than 1,000 Chinese students and researchers under an order by President Donald Trump, accusing them of espionage, said the State Department on Wednesday. Trump, in a May 29 proclamation, as tensions rose with Beijing on multiple fronts, declared that some Chinese nationals officially in the United States for study had stolen intellectual property and helped modernize China's military. The State Department declined to give details on whose visas had been revoked, citing privacy laws. Nearly 370,000 students from China were enrolled in U.S. universities in 2019, the most of any country, offering a lucrative source of income to institutions. U.S. officials accused China of seeking to steal university research into COVID-19, a reason cited for the Trump administration's closing China's consulate in Houston in June. In a few weeks, or months, Judge Vanessa Baraitser will rule on whether Julian Assange can be taken to the United States to face a string of serious espionage charges. On Tuesday, at the second day of the WikiLeaks founder's extradition hearing in London, Assange reportedly shouted out "nonsense" during the hearing when the lawyer representing the U.S. told a witness that the WikiLeaks founder was facing extradition not for handling leaked documents but for releasing names and endangering U.S. informants. Judge Baraitser delivered a forceful warning to Assange that he would be removed from court for good if he couldn't keep his thoughts to himself while witnesses were delivering their evidence. The judge added, "I understand you'll hear things you disagree with, and you'd like to contradict and speak out these things yourself, but this is not your opportunity to do so." The warning came after Clive Stanford Smith told the court that grave violations of law, including the use of U.S. drones for targeted strikes in Pakistan, as well as alleged U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan and at Guantanamo Bay, had been exposed in the documents published by WikiLeaks. James Lewis QC, who was representing the U.S. authorities, hit back that the case was not about the usefulness of the documents and that the U.S. charges revolved around the publication of the names of informants in Iraq and Afghanistan that had put their lives in danger. It was just the second day of a 4-week hearing. The U.S. potential charges against Assange carry a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Lawmakers in Portland, Oregon on Wednesday passed landmark bans on the use of facial recognition technology by government agencies as well as private entities in public spaces. Lawmakers cited concerns around invasions of privacy, lack of transparency, and the use of biased technology, specifically by law enforcement, and called the bans model legislation for the rest of the country. Other cities, including San Francisco, Oakland, and Boston have prohibited government agencies from using facial recognition tech in response to similar concerns, but Portland goes a step further by also applying to private entities. The private ban outlaws the technology in private businesses such as restaurants, convenience stores, entertainment venues, banks, doctor's office, hotels, Airbnb rentals, Uber, Lyft, and public transit stations, as well as anywhere that provides publicly accessed facilities, lodging, transportation, or goods and services. However, it does include some exceptions, notably churches, private residences, private clubs or institutions. Individuals, including those employed by the government, can also use the technology to unlock smartphones and tag people or use face filters on social media. The ban also creates a legal right for people to sue private companies that collect their information in violation of the law and seek up to $1,000 in damages for each day of violations. Some tech industry groups fought Portland's ban. It is reported that Amazon spent $24,000 fighting the ban, the first time it has lobbied in the city at all. The Information and Technology Innovation Foundation, a think tank backed by facial recognition software makers like Google and IBM, also authored an op-ed in opposition to the Portland ban. In Rochester, New York, 6 naked or nearly naked protesters, some with Black Lives Matter written across their backs, sat silently on the street facing Rochester Public Safety Building on a rainy, chilly Monday morning. They wore spit hoods, the mesh fabric bag that Rochester police put on Prude on March 23rd. Prude had died of asphyxiation as police restrained him, according to a county medical examiner. After sitting unclothed in the rain, the protesters were wrapped in blankets and led from the site. The group that organized the protests, which they simply labeled as community members, distributed a list of demands for New York State, including having police not respond to mental health calls, changing policy for police misconduct, and banning the use of chemical agents against peaceful protesters. China outlined a new global data security initiative on Tuesday and called on other countries to sign up. The initiative is a retaliation against the U.S. Clean Network Initiative, which it unveiled last month and is aimed at keeping Chinese internet infrastructure sealed off from the U.S. China initiative calls on firms to seal up any security backdoors that could leave data vulnerable to hacking, while respecting the data laws of the country they operate in. Some individual countries are aggressively pursuing unilateralism, throwing dirty water on other countries under the pretext of cleanliness, and conducting global hunts on leading companies of other countries under the pretext of security, said Foreign Minister Wang Yi. This is naked bullying and should be opposed and rejected. Wang's comment on leading companies being hunted appears to be a thinly veiled reference to U.S. treatment of TikTok and Huawei. The U.S. last year also began a campaign of lobbying allied countries to freeze Chinese telecoms company Huawei out of their 5G networks. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's Clean Network Initiative is a broad attempt to lock China out of Western internet. The idea is to block Chinese apps from app stores, stop Chinese phone companies from pre-installing U.S. apps, and keep U.S. data off Chinese cloud services and guard undersea cables. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden misspoke during a campaign stop in Michigan, incorrectly saying that over 6,000 U.S. military members had died from coronavirus. As of Wednesday, only 7 members of the military had died from COVID-19. Shortly after the event, Biden's campaign quickly clarified that he had mixed up the numbers for Michigan with those from the military. Biden's verbal slip has plagued him throughout his 2020 presidential bid, with the Trump campaign using them to argue that the Democratic nominee is unfit for Oval Office, as well as draw attention away from Trump's own mistakes. President Trump on Wednesday announced a list of 20 more people he would consider nominating to the Supreme Court should a seat become available, including 3 sitting Republican senators. Speaking from the diplomatic reception room of the White House, the president read off a list of names, including Daniel Cameron from Kentucky, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, and Josh Hawley of Missouri, and others. The president said the 20 new names are being added to his previous list of 25. Josh Hawley quickly declined the nomination. Tom Cotton said he was honored to be considered and tweeted, "It's time for Roe v. Wade to go." The latest iteration of the list comes 2 months before the presidential election. 21% of voters said that the Supreme Court was their number one issue. The next presidential term could be significant for Supreme Court nominations. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 87, Justice Stephen Breyer is 82, Thomas is 72, and Justice Samuel Alito is 70. According to a whistleblower complaint filed by the Department of Homeland Security, Trump administration appointees suppressed intelligence on Russian election interference and the threat from white supremacists. The complaint by Brian Murphy alleges interference from officials included acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf, acting DHS Deputy Secretary Kenneth Cuccinelli, and National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. In May, Wolf instructed Murphy to stop providing intelligence assessment on Russian election meddling and start reporting instead on interference activities by China and Iran, according to the complaint. Wolf stated that these instructions specifically originated from White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. Murphy alleges he was told by Cuccinelli to downplay the threat of white supremacists in favor of promoting the narrative that left-wing groups were more threatening. Wolf and Cuccinelli told Murphy to modify intelligence assessments to match public comments by President Donald Trump about anarchist groups, including Antifa. Andrew Bates, a campaign spokesman for Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, said in a statement that, if true, these latest revelations cement a pattern of high-ranking Trump administration officials not only keeping law enforcement officials and the American people in the dark about the assault on our democracy, but corrupting intelligence processes to benefit the president politically. House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff said the complaint shows how dangerous and harmful it is that the administration has ended in-person briefings to Congress about foreign interference in the election in favor of written summaries. If written products are being altered for political reasons or worse, withheld entirely, Schiff says, how can the American people trust that this administration will inform voters on how foreign powers are trying to influence them or where the threats really come from and protect our national security, the California Democrat said in a statement. A Canadian petition asking Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to reverse expansive new gun control rules has a record-setting number of 230,905 signatures. The petition read, "We, the undersigned citizens of Canada, call upon the Prime Minister to immediately scrap his government's May 1st, 2020 order and council decision related to confiscating legally owned firearms and instead pass legislation that will target criminals, stop the smuggling of firearms into Canada, go after those who illegally acquire firearms, and apologize to legal firearm owners in Canada." The petition also argues that most guns used in violent crimes are obtained illegally, including those used in a mass shooting in Nova Scotia in 2018. Weeks after the deadly shooting, Trudeau banned more than 1,500 models and variants of rifles, including AR-15s, Mini-14s, and firearms that the Nova Scotia gunmen used. Brown University's Costs of War project estimates in a new report Tuesday that 37 million people have been displaced in the nearly 20 years since former President George W. Bush declared a global war on terror. The author said the figure is a very conservative estimate, and the number could actually be in the range of 48 to 59 million. Iraq has the most displaced people, with 9.2 million who had to flee their homes, according to the study. The number of people displaced by the war on terror exceeds every other conflict since 1900, except for World War II. The authors of the project say the legitimacy and efficacy of the war should be questioned more than ever given nearly 2 decades of disastrous outcomes. Bob Woodward's new book, Rage, describes 18 wide-ranging interviews Trump gave Woodward from December 5, 2019 to July 21, 2020. The interviews were recorded by Woodward with Trump's permission. Rage also includes brutal assessments of Trump's presidency from many of his former top national security officials, including former Defense Secretary James Mattis, former Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, and former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. It also provides access to 25 never-before-seen letters Trump exchanged with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. In his letters to Trump, Kim addresses him as Your Excellency and punctuates them with flowery prose. Trump's responses are more straightforward, but nevertheless filled with flattery. Trump wrote back to Kim on December 28, "Like you, I have no doubt that a great result will be accomplished between our two countries, and that the only two leaders who can do it are you and me." Trump has tweeted out 2 of the 27 letters, but the other 25 have never been seen before. Woodward was able to review all of the letters but not given copies, so he recorded transcripts of their contents into his audio recorder. Also coming out in journalist Bob Woodward's new book that is creating interest is that President Donald Trump admitted he knew weeks before the first confirmed U.S. coronavirus death that the virus was dangerous, airborne, highly contagious, and more deadly than even your strenuous flus, and that he repeatedly played it down publicly. Trump's admissions are in stark contrast to his frequent public comments at the time, insisting that the virus was going to disappear and all works out fine. Trump told Woodward on March 19th, even as he declared a national emergency over the virus, "I wanted to play it down. I still like playing it down because I don't want to create a panic." The U.S. Senate is poised to vote Thursday on whether to advance a slimmed-down Republican-crafted pandemic relief bill, opening what's likely to be the final stages of the months-long partisan battle over fiscal stimulus. Democrats say they have the votes to block the bill introduced by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from even reaching the floor. Once that happens, it isn't clear whether negotiations might resume. McConnell on Wednesday expressed doubts that the Democrats want to make any deal. Senator Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was more optimistic, seeing signs the Trump administration is more open to compromise after Steve Mnuchin's comments. The $500 billion to $700 billion skinny bill, far less than the $2.2 trillion relief the Democrats want, restores supplemental jobless benefits and extends small business aid, but doesn't include comprehensive state and local aid or another round of stimulus checks for individuals. The pared-back proposal, released Tuesday afternoon, provides a $300 per week unemployment benefit enhancement, $105 billion for schools, a $10 billion grant to the U.S. Postal Service, $258 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, $47 billion for vaccines and testing needs, and liability protections for employers. Absent from the bill is additional help for airlines, which face a wave of job cuts when support runs out for the $2.2 trillion CARES Act, the last big stimulus package that passed. That will do for now. If you would like to delve more into these topics, see links to our sources in the description below. Subscribe to this channel to receive a daily news update. Thanks a bunch for listening. Be relaxed, be informed, be connected.